Excellent. We're all started. Welcome to Coaching Stabilization Tasks of Learning About Addictions and Developing Self-Responsibility. The announcements for this particular webinar talked about self-efficacy, and maybe that's something we'll just explore down the road. However, what we want to focus in on clearly today comes from Recovery Coach Academy, and where we look at the stages of recovery. And if you look at those initial stages of recovery, stage one talks about stabilization. And Stacy, earlier this month, connected with me and said, let's do this let's do the stages of recovery and move through them. So I picked two. And the two that we're going to talk about today are learning about addictions and developing self-responsibility. If you look at the initial image on the front page, it talks about coaching and where it refers to, okay, somebody's having some problems with the audio, HRCC. Is everybody else okay with my audio? Okay, cool. We'll move along and hopefully HRCC will catch up with us. When you look at this particular image, and again, I love Googling images to help me to think about concepts that I'm thinking about. And this one looks at the fact that in our coaching, we get training. The goal is to mentor. In the process of that training, we get skill development. And we make an effort to be as good as we can be, which is reaching our potential 100%. And so much of this process is education, motivation on our part. Many of us look at it as being passion and support. And this really spills into a primary part of coaching is knowledge. Think about the elements of coaching as you experience them. Thinking about the elements of coaching as you might be thinking about them. And think about you teach best what you most need to learn. Because as a coach, in coaching recoveries, this is a critical part of the process. I teach best what I most need to learn. So as we go through this particular webinar, which looks at what is our role in helping recoveries to learn about addictions and helping recoveries to develop self-responsibility. That was the initial question that Stacy posited. I think it's a very valuable one because it put me in a position, folks, I've been doing Recovery Coach Academy for 10 years. And prior to Recovery Coach Academy, my own practice, my own efforts to help were evolving towards what I now do as a recovery coach. And in that process, there was not only this professional development, which this piece looks at when you talk about coaching, i.e. training, mentoring. And the mentoring piece means somebody else helps me to be the best that I can be. It's skill development, it's reaching my potential, it's education, motivation, support, and knowledge. And these are all things that I'm looking to pass on to people that I coach. Think about that intently. Coaches coach coaches as coaches coach recoveries. So in many ways, training recoveries, mentoring recoveries, helping recoveries to develop skills, helping recoveries to reach 100% of their potential, and helping recoveries in relation to what they need to learn, i.e. education, and how they need to learn it and move their lives forward, i.e. motivation, demand support, and that puts them in a position of gaining the knowledge to improve the quality of their lives, to recover. So in teaching best what I most need to learn, I'm also teaching what I perceive would be helpful for recoveries to learn. And that is so much of my role. Much of what I'm going to share with you over the next 50 minutes or so is how I do this, how I perform the role of helping recoveries to stabilize their recovery, stage one of recovery, through learning about addictions and developing self-responsibility. I hope by the end of this webinar, you have a clearer sense of how you might do this, because it's about you developing your own art based upon the science. And in this case, the science is the stages of recovery. In addition, the other parts of the science, motivational interviewing, cultural responsiveness, stages of change, self-care, ethical considerations, all of this is a part of your science in developing your own art of coaching. So this is an overview of coaching that you have presented to you in the first page. And think about you in the context of being a coach, but also think about this in the context of what you are coaching. You would hope that recoverees can coach as well. And not necessarily coach, but teach as well. When I work with recoverees and we go through many of the things that we're going to go through today, and again, what you will see today, pretty much each one of these slides are slides or information that I've shared with recoverees. There's not much that I don't do that I don't share with recoverees. So again, I'm a coach, coaching coaches, coaching recoverees, and you can do the same. As we move along in this process, if you have any questions or thoughts about what you see, feel free to type them. And we'll see where we go. So again, as you think about Richard Bach's quote from Illusions, Illusions' full title is Adventures of the Illusions, the Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah. Do not be reluctant to help yourself. Do not be reluctant to save yourself relative to your own development of your art and your potential as a helper and as a coach. But in that process, I've clearly learned in the almost 40 years that I've been doing this work that as a helper, I need help. So where I am looking to save myself, the adventures of that reluctant Messiah is to don't be reluctant to save yourself. Don't be reluctant to educate yourself. I need people in that process because many times I don't know what I don't know. And that's where so much of what we're doing is helpful. So again, as we go through this information, you teach best what you most need to learn. Some of the takeaways that I want you to might focus in on is, what do I most need to learn relative to my performing the role of a recovery coach, supporting recoverees in the stabilization tasks of learning about addictions and developing self-responsibility. Also, as I move along, stay tuned to the three-legged stool that we learn in Recovery Coach Academy. That is so much a part of my science. That is so much of my science that I'm developing as my art. I actively listen, I ask good questions, and I discover and manage my own stuff. And part of the discovery and the management of my own stuff is to make sure I've learned what I want to teach recoverees. I'm practicing what I've learned as I'm looking to teach recoverees. And I give them the same task. Again, many times when I offer these educational pieces for recoveries and I have conversations that matter about stabilizing recovery and the different aspects of it, two of which we're going to look at today, I ask them to think about it and then go teach someone what they've learned. Because when you teach something, you'll learn it twice. So maybe when you walk away from this webinar, you'll teach a coworker what you've learned, or you might teach a recovery what you've learned. But the prospect of teaching recoverees and teaching yourselves and understanding these concepts of addictions and self-responsibility is a critical part of growing and learning. And it's certainly a critical part of your own personal self-care. No doubt in my mind. So with that in mind, let's move on. We're looking at the stabilization tasks of learning about addictions and developing self-responsibility. These are part of the science of coaching recovery, as I spoke about earlier. These are two of the stages of recovery that we learn in Recovery Coach Academy. Stabilization is the first stage of recovery that you're introduced to in day 3 of Recovery Coach Academy. When you think about the stages of recovery, I didn't print the page here because I've done it redundantly, but what I want you to think about is stage 1 stabilization. It's the first stage of recovery and it's referred to as stabilization. It's defined as firmness of purpose and character. The tasks of stage 1 include learning about addictions, which we'll look at it today, staying clean and sober no matter what, if that's applicable to the recovery's journey, physical detox and stabilization, which may need to happen in order for stabilization to be most able to be achieved. It's learning to socialize in a group. It's learning to break the pattern of isolation. Stage 1 also includes the task of developing role models for healthy recovery, which in many ways, as a recovery coach, you will become one or be one, whether you like that or not. It's staying away from, it's anxiety management. It's staying away from risky places, situations, and people. The other one we're going to look at today is developing self-responsibility. And finally, learning to ask for help and support. And again, over the next couple, 3 weeks, or next couple of 3 months, we're going to look at these other stages, but we're looking at the stage 1 stabilization today. Notes that I wrote in my own Recovery Coach Participants Manual, I wrote on May the 9th of 2018, what are the recovery roles to support each stage of recovery? And I want you to think about that, because what are the roles that you play as a recovery coach as you help recovery to move through these stages of recovery are a major piece of your work. As you think about this, again, we think about motivation and cheerleading, being an ally and a confidant. Being a truth teller comes into play quite definitely, where we provide honest and helpful information, which we'll think about and talk about today. We offer suggestions. We help to identify patterns of behavior. We don't sugarcoat things. As a role model and a motivator, we walk the talk and we provide stage-appropriate recovery information. What we're looking at today is stage-appropriate recovery information. As a co-problem solver with recoveries, we help them to identify potential problem areas. We don't tell them the right way. We help them to discover options. And part of helping them to discover options is helping them to look at the tasks of stabilizing their recovery, which will offer them options to move forward. These are the kinds of tasks, these are the kinds of focus pieces that I offer to recoveries to think about. In our problem-solving activity, we tell the truth without blaming or judging the recovery. That's how we help them to recover. That's how we help them to embrace the information. Another role is that we're resource brokers. And I look at the information that we're going to be offering recoveries as resources. When I first started helping, I did a group a long time ago that was called DART. And I still use DART to this day. But back then, DART was the Drug and Alcohol Resource Team. And for me, what was offered in DART, and primarily at that point, it was offered to adolescents, and then later on to adults and young adults, what I offered in DART were resources for recovery. The stabilization tasks of learning about addictions and developing self-responsibility are resources for recovery. Much like you are a human resource in a recovery's life, here are informational, knowledge resources that can have an impact on a recovery's process. The other roles that we might play are advocate, community organizer. Another key role in this information about helping recoveries to stabilize is to be a lifestyle consultant. When I look at the primary role that I play in my role as a recovery coach, and also you'll find many times in my role As a coach of recovery coaches, I play the role of lifestyle consultant predominantly. I offer feedback on a recovery lifestyle and or a care lifestyle. I ask, how's that working for you? I focus on recovery and wellness and care. In fact, over time, my work has evolved into something I call care recovery. It's a combination of care and recovery. It's my appreciation of the fact that over time, in my own process of recovering, I have turned my life over to care. Notice that's a piece of the third step of 12-step programs. The third step says, made a decision to turn my will and my life over to care, into the care of God. I look at that, and in my own utilization of that step, I've made a decision to turn my life over to care. The ability for people to care about me and the ability to take care of myself. You know, when you think about being a lifestyle consultant as a coach of recovery coaches, I want you to think about your lifestyle relative to your professional development and your lifestyle relative to your personal development. I firmly believe that personal development and self-care are ethical considerations. And they're clearly ethical considerations, because if I'm not walking the walk as I talk this talk with recoverees and I'm not practicing what I'm sharing and offering to them, I'm not the best that I can be. Lifestyle consultant focuses on recovery and wellness and care and discusses healthy choices. Now, again, that's what I do and help you to do in this process of looking at learning about addiction, and especially in developing self-responsibility. You'll see us looking at healthy choices in being. Another role of the recovery coach is to be a friend and companion. A part of reducing the power differential that the friend and companion speaks to is to partner with recoveries, is what I do. As I tell them the truth without blame or judgment, I'm also very much open to their truth and actively listening to their truth and helping them to hear how I experience their truth. And I'm not judging or blaming them, and I'm open to their outcome, but not attached to my outcome. That's a part of me discovering and managing my own stuff. Okay. Again, if questions come up or thoughts come up, when you think about the stabilization tasks of learning about addictions and developing self-responsibility, that's the science. I love this circles, because where the science moves over into the art is where you start to learn and practice how to do and coach these tasks. And that's what we're asking you to do today. As we move through this process, as you gain some sense of how I have learned and how I practice doing these tasks of stage 1 stabilization, I want you to think about, what do I do? Or do you even do it? How much attention have you paid to the stages of recovery since you left Recovery Coach Academy? Have you ever shared these stages of recovery with a recovery? Is it something you spend a lot of time enhancing your own skills and your own knowledge relative to this information? Folks, I've been doing this work almost 40 years, and I've been training Recovery Coach Academy for 10 years. And I still learn every time Stacy and I put our heads together and come up with a topic. My ability to teach this topic is to teach what I'm learning. And again, every time I do this work, every time, and that's why the webinars are so exciting for me, because when you learn something, and then teach it, you learn it twice. So I'm in the process of learning it again as I share it with you. And that piques my wonder and my curiosity. So the overlap of these two circles, where science is expected to meet art, is wonder. And what that speaks about is when you walk away from this webinar, when you learn what you learned through this particular webinar, continue to wonder, what do I do with this? And more importantly, how do I do with this? How do I do with this? I'm currently thinking about developing a workbook. And the workbook will be a takeoff on something I call Household Dart. And that's a vehicle that I've used over time that in many ways is what I call my educational or training of the people that I help process. And DART, as I said before, was referred to Drug and Alcohol Resource Team. And DART is also my ability to look at how I do what I do. How is honest, open, and willing in 12-step programs. How is the beginning of what I called a DART meeting preamble. The first part of that DART meeting preamble, well, actually it spells out, it uses the first letters of the word of the sentence, how to get the most out of DART. And I first started using that back in the 80s with adolescents. It was a way to catch their attention. And how to get the most out of DART. I can't remember it all right now, but the first three letters, how, are honest work and effort, open your mind, and willing to learn. Think about that. The expectation that I have for recoveries, and I tell them point blank, how are you going to get the most out of me is spelled out in this piece that I'm offering you, how to get the most out of DART. How to get the most out of art. How to get the most out of DART is honest work and effort, open your mind, willing to learn. I'm sharing that with you. You'll see later on when we talk about self-responsibility, the key to self-responsibility, the key to enhancing your performance in your role as a recovery coach is to be a constant learner. Yeah, and it's to be full of wonder. You know, when I spell the word wonderful now, I spell it capital WONDER, capital FULL. Wonderful. Wonderful. And I'm filled with wonder. Again, if you've been around me long enough, I was reintroduced to the concept of wonder by my grandson, who probably from 5 years on, whenever he wanted something from Grandpa, would say, Grandpa, I was wondering. And that just fills me with joy. Because I want him to be curious. You know, in this particular sense, he's curious about what he can get from Grandpa. But isn't that what grandpas do? So think about this concept of wonder, folks. And then wonder how you will use this information. Again, a way that I do this work, as I'm approaching a time that I'm going to spend with the recovery, or many times I call them helpees, or partners in a help process that I engage with, and that includes recovery coaches, I find myself as I approach that particular contact, that particular connection, I am wondering how it will go. I am wondering what will this recovery bring to the process that we can utilize and help. It is that fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, which I now understand is reverent awe and the concept of being full of wonder. Yeah, I looked at a book by, of all people, Andres Ariane, and she talks about the second half of life. And she speaks to people my age as finding awe and wonder in living life. So, Richard, that makes big sense to me. You know, I am in awe of the fact that I can wake up every day with a HeartMate, which is a mechanical device that keeps my heart pumping, and with HeartMates, who are the individuals in my life who continue to give me joy and a feeling of value and worth as I live with heart failure. And part of me living with heart failure is being in awe of this mechanical as well as these relational connections that are keeping me moving and going. You know, it'll be a year in August since I entered the hospital to address my heart failure issues. And so far, so good. The true goodness of it, the piece that I am truly in awe of, And at some points wonder, and I'm curious about, is the continuation of the fact that I've not been rehospitalized. And as I look at the literature and as I look at and talk with other people who have similar heart failure devices as I do, the majority of them have been rehospitalized. But I mention that because I'm in awe of this mechanical device that's keeping me alive. And I'm also in awe of and appreciate, and I am full of wonder and curiosity and joy relative to how I have been sustained over time by the relationships that have helped me through. And I've only mentioned that because that's the kind of relationship that you and I can have with the recovery or the people in our lives that we care about. And again, much of what we're talking about, even if at some point, these stabilization tasks can help adolescents to adolescents. I'm doing that with my grandchildren. These stabilization tasks with some tweaking of the words are helpful, as a way to help people build their lives. I'm one who's focusing now on helping people to appreciate that it is critical that we lead our lives in the midst of trying to live our lives. And leading our lives is leading with a vision of where we want to go. And that was something we learned in adolescence and or expected to do. That was a task of adolescence that is critical for us to do. The task of adolescence are, who am I, i.e., what is my identity? Why am I? What is my purpose? And where am I going? What's my direction? And what's my vision for that direction? Let's move on so I can get through this. Again, here we go. I went too far. I found this wonder circle I wonder circle. Oh, probably about 3 or 4 months ago. And I use it a lot now because it really points home the points relative to what you just saw in the overlapping circles, between the science of coaching recovery and the science of the stages of recovery and the art or developing your art of that process in the midst of that give yourself permission to wonder. And what this wonder circle speaks about is I wonder what is my role as a recovery coach in supporting the stabilization task of learning about addictions and developing self-responsibility. I wonder about that. And I hope you're doing that as we move along in this process. Also in this process is I think about what is my role. As a recovery coach in supporting the stabilization task of learning about addictions and developing self-responsibility. I walk away from this wonderment and this thinking that's fueled and generated through this webinar. And then I go on to my world and I try it. I try out this role of being a recovery coach, making an honest effort to support the stabilization tasks of learning addiction, about addictions and help recovery to develop self-responsibility. I think about it, and then I try it. I practice it. Not only do I try it in the lives of recovery, I try it in my own life. Folks, I want you to honestly look at when you get an opportunity, when you walk away from this webinar, honestly look at stabilization tasks and see how well you're doing with them. Honestly, look at those stabilization tasks and see when the last time you paid attention to them and off and looked at them as being a part of what has heart and meaning in your own recovery. We can't give away what we don't have for ourselves. We teach best what we most need to learn. As I go through this process of wondering and thinking